up until this moment, we have been in league with great forces. And I'm not just talking about the forces of nature. I'm talking about the forces of all of these incredible women and the work that they're doing and the wisdom that you all hold and are applying to your strategies and thinking innovatively, and how everything integrates and fits together is systems operated. I'm just so impressed with everybody. I had to express that. So, and those who are coming up are equally so. This session is called Global Choices: What We Now Know We Must Do. And I actually learned that phrase from Sylvia Earle many, many years ago, in listening to one of her presentations. And it struck me that what she was saying is that we know what we need to do, but we're not doing it. And we have, and we'll see this, and it'll be shared with us in the next session, we have the tools, we have the intelligence, we have the solutions, but we're not implementing them. So there's a disconnect, and that's one of our big challenges, because this is an epic calling at this moment in time, and everything matters in this. Our community, what happens in communities matters, what happens in indigenous territories happens, what happens in the global commons matters, human rights matter, what happens to the vulnerable and the disenfranchised matters. And we cannot tinker with nature without keeping all the parts intact, as Aldo Leopold said many years ago. And from the scientists, the earth scientists that we heard from earlier, the breadth and the depth of their understanding of all the forces and laws of nature and what's going on is amazing. But then it's also amazing to know that we don't know what we don't know. And yet we're not using the precautionary principle, which is, if we don't know what's going to happen by doing some sort of questionable activity or policy, then let's wait. Let's be cautious about that. So I am just delighted to be able to introduce Sylvia, and this conversation. This is an armchair conversation, if you will, called The Blue Heart. Oceans are the solutions at stake. And Sylvia has a resume that I could, and a vita that I could never, in 20 hours actually go through. But she has the most time, I think that's true, of any woman under the water. At one point in her life, she had spent more time underwater than on land. Very, very impressive. And she's a marine biologist, an explorer, an author, a lecturer. She's been a National Geographic Explorer in Residence since 1998. She was the first female chief scientist of the U.S. National Oceanographic Atmosphere Administration, NOAA, and was named by Time magazine as its first hero of the planet in 1998. And she's also an ocean elder, and the ocean elders are dedicated to protecting the ocean and its wildlife. And she has so much knowledge and so much experience and so much heart that it gives him much pleasure for you to be with us today, Sylvia. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Sally, and thanks to all of you who are tuning in. Behind me is an image of our home, a home that is characterized by being blue. My message is pretty simple, especially in light of what we're now experiencing with a pandemic that really focuses our attention on how vulnerable we are and how we are all in this together. National boundaries don't matter, age doesn't matter, who we are otherwise, we're all in this together. From high in the sky, you don't see the boundaries that we set up among ourselves. This is one planet. We are one species among many others. And we are so fortunate to be who we are at this point in time. If you could choose a time to be on this planet, this would be the best time in all of human history. And you might think, not now, not with a pandemic, not with all the problems that we now can see, that we have wars, we have, of course, the disease, we have poverty, but we have knowledge that did not exist and could not exist before. This is the first time that, faced with these huge problems, that we are armed with the best capacity that we have ever had to do something about it. The fact that we are connected with 8 billion minds is also, for the first time, the opportunity to really think in a way that we could not before, not even half a century ago, let alone 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, smallpox was a huge problem globally, and it spread much less quickly than the pandemic that we're now experiencing. But it really wrapped the world, wrapped humankind with a common problem. But now we have, for the first time, the capacity to act with knowledge. And one of the things we now know that we could not know before is how important the natural world is in terms of shaping, in all of the universe, a place that's hospitable for us. And we could not see before how humans are impacting the very foundation, what makes Earth special in the universe of unfriendly, hostile places. We know, as we could not know before, that we are the agent of our own source of, of problems. And we also are the source of solutions. Taking care of the systems that make our existence possible has to be the number one priority. Everything else follows. If we have a healthy planet, it's the best hope that we'll have for helping healthy humans, a healthy population. And that's the framework within which everything else follows. The economy, our security. First, we have to be alive. We have to have existence as our top priority. And we are threatening our very existence through what we're doing to the natural world, through what we're taking out of the ocean, through clear-cutting forests, for taking the amazing diversity of life and really making inroads, losing that diversity, losing species, losing ecosystems at a rate that is unprecedented. So we know what to do. Sally said it exactly. We know what to do. We have to take care of nature. We have to take care of the water, the air, the fabric of life, as if our lives depend on it, because of course they do. So We began establishing national parks a bit more than 100 years ago, an idea that has caught on around the world. And we started to take care of the ocean belatedly, but we are beginning to with a system of protected areas. I've been involved with Mission Blue to establish and working with organizations and individuals around the world to embrace the ocean, identify critical areas as we have done on the land, places that have a magnified impact on all the rest. Right now, in 2020, we have perhaps the best chance we will ever have to reverse the decline that has been obvious throughout human history, but especially in the last half century. Accelerated decline. We can accelerate recovery because now we know what to do. Half of the world, you could say, is female. Here we are. Women, half the birds who fly, female. Half the fish who swim, half the whales. We have power that has been underutilized up to the present time. But here's the other thing about half the world. Half of the world, half of the planet, as we measure the world, is beyond the jurisdiction of any one nation, belongs to everyone or no one, the global commons, the high seas, like the skies, that's a global commons. The ocean, beyond national jurisdiction, from the surface down to the great depths, is a global commons, the high seas. This year, decisions are being made that will determine in a magnified way the future of half the world. The United Nations is deliberating, so shall we save big places in the ocean as part of our investment in that which holds the planet steady? To say this part of the planet, collectively, our global commons, we will hold and safeguard as our insurance policy, places where we just don't take wildlife. The fish are safe in this big chunk of the ocean. We are making decisions right now through the United Nations, through our impact as humans everywhere, to say how much of half of the world are we going to safeguard. And the deep sea, trying to set up the conversation for Vasser, who I think will take a deeper dive into the issues about what is now at stake. Half of the world, the ocean, the sea floor, under the jurisdiction of, of the Deep Sea Bed Mining Authority. We humans have given authority to the United Nations to determine, will we, shall we, or shall we not mine the deep sea? For the first time in human history, we have the capacity through the technologies that now exist that didn't exist 50 years ago or any time in the history of humankind. We are poised right now with the power to make smart, wise decisions about the future of our home. We can use our power, the power of knowledge, the superpower of knowing that we are vulnerable. What we do to take care of the planet means what we're doing to take care of ourselves. We can continue doing what we've been doing, taking from the natural world, cutting the trees, losing the diversity of life, extracting millions of tons of ocean wildlife, as if there's no end to how much we can extract and still have a planet that works in our favor. Or we have the moment in time right now to move in a different direction, to go from this decline, the consumption of nature, to let's safeguard nature and thereby safeguard ourselves and be that generation at this point in time, that those 50 years, 100 years, 1,000, 10,000 years from now, we'll look back and say, they got it. Whatever it is, was it the pandemic that made them aware of their vulnerability? Was it this accumulation of knowledge that finally they could see, what those who lived before could not see, that this is a moment in time that will never come again, that we are poised at this moment when we can go from the decline to recovery and to find that place for ourselves within the natural systems that make our existence possible. Over to you, Vasser. You can see the way the world will be in 50 years, 100, or 1,000. And you know, we all know that we have the ability to do what it takes. Let's just do it.
Vasser, she's the deep sea mining lead for Global Choices, and also the campaign director for the Oxygen Project. But I wanted to add my personal view on Vasser because she introduced me to deep sea level mining back in COP25. So she really opened my eyes to a lot of the issues that she's going to talk about right now. But I just want to say that she's an amazing soul who wants to do better things for the planet.
Thank you, Shie, for that introduction. I just kind of hopped in real quick, and I'm just so excited to be here for Earth Day and EarthX, Earth Week and EarthX. I'm sitting on a virtual panel with all of these amazing women, one in particular, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who is a personal hero of mine. So this isn't just an honor, it's honestly a dream of mine to be here talking today. And I also want to thank Sally and Shie and EarthX for giving me a platform and a voice to be speaking about deep seabed mining, because there is not a climate disaster that is as urgent and as little talked about as deep seabed mining. So I only have a little bit of time to talk briefly about the politics and what deep seabed mining is. I'm sure many of you, like I hadn't heard what it is, might have no idea what I'm talking about, and really the politics around it. But first, I want to tell you why I'm here. So one of my favorite quotes by Gloria Steinem is, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." And when I first heard about the truth about deep seabed mining, I was really pissed off. So I hope by the end of this session, you'll be pissed off too. So let's get into the history and the politics really quickly so that we can get to some really important questions, as I know we all want to hear what Sylvia Earle thinks about this and what the experts are saying, what the scientists are saying, what the oceanographers and the ocean community is saying about deep seabed mining. So the International Seabed Authority, the ISA, was created under the law of the sea, and it operates like its own mini little UN. It operates autonomously and has 167 member countries. The ISA controls 54%, like Sylvia was saying, over half of the entire Earth's surface in our international deep seas. And this is a huge problem when our governing body of 54% of the entire Earth's surface is sectioning off our international waters to countries that are backed by deep seabed mining companies with a deep sea mining only agenda, when the ISA was created to benefit all of humankind. And so right now in July, even as the COVID crisis is happening, everyone's taking a pause. The UN is taking a pause. We all know our lives have been deeply changed. And they are still hosting a meeting in July, and they're trying to push forward their mining agenda by voting on something called the Mining Code. And this Mining Code, even though it's supposed to have environmental regulations, it's being largely created by 30 men behind closed doors with deep seabed mining companies to have little to no environmental regulations, and using legal jargon like binding to make this mining code binding, and also to not have any liability on mining companies themselves. So this is a huge issue, especially as a growing number of scientists and experts are saying this is so risky, especially in the face of climate change, especially as our deep sea and our oceans are our largest carbon sink. How are we supposed to reach our climate goals in 10 years if we undo and unearth the very systems that provide us our oxygen and sequester our most carbon? So that's a little bit of a brief synopsis of a very complicated issue and complex issue, but I know we have some really great questions, and I know we all want to hear what Sylvia and I have to say about these questions. So back over to you guys.
We have a chance to put a moratorium, a 10-year moratorium on making a decision about mining or not. But it really takes putting this as a priority of having our voices heard instead of having this happen in undercover, basically. And it's the biggest land grab on the planet. Like, all at once, a handful of vested interests are taking over this huge part of the planet, and nobody's paying attention, except for those who have a vested interest in the outcome. Well, in fact, we all have a vested interest, but we just are either unaware of that or complacent about it. The justification for taking from the deep sea at this point is getting valuable minerals that are useful in terms of making batteries, in terms of powering our connected world. But there are other sources, and we need to invest in looking at alternatives for these metals, these minerals that if you have an economy based on something that's really difficult and really rare, it's like making your business dependent on unobtainium. If you've seen Avatar, you'll know what I'm talking about. Why destroy so much to get so little when we really don't need to do this?
Absolutely. And as you are, Mother Earth in human form and Mother Ocean in human form, and you've seen these ecosystems with your own eyes, and you know the importance that these ecosystems play. When we go in and deep seabed mine, this creates complete dead zones in these areas. And that not only affects these areas and species that are not even documented yet, this also affects the ocean's larger ecosystems, our oxygen production, like I said, our carbon sequestration, and will have larger impacts on our planet as a whole. And I don't know if you guys, Shea or Sally, have some questions for us regarding rare earth minerals or how it will impact us.
I'd like to, if you could tell us a little bit about some of these quote unquote rare earth minerals. Are they really that rare? Number one. Number two, Sylvia brought up alternatives. Can those be mined out of landfills, or is there technology that's can reuse what has already been mined? And then the third thing is that who uses them? And what's the strategy to get those who seem to think they need them to not need them anymore, not to use them, to say, we're done. We don't want to be a part of tearing up the ocean floor.
Right. So one big myth about deep seabed mining is that we have to have it for a green, renewable energy future. And that is just simply not the case. Rare earth minerals and battery storage as it is now, we do rely heavily on rare earth minerals, but the word rare isn't quite, it's a misnomer, because these minerals aren't as rare. But two, just think how long it took us to develop the iPhone. I mean, I was in middle school when it came out. It's been around for about 11 years, and it seems like we've had an iPhone for forever. So technology can be developed fast. Tesla has already created batteries that use way less or rare earth minerals than it has in the past. And there's also, Sally brought up alternatives. There are really great alternatives already in the process of being made. And we just need time. And we have that time if we have a moratorium. But if we allow the ISA to push through a mining code that prioritizes industry and profit over the environment, environmental costs are not included whatsoever. So what we need more so than rare earth minerals is time to create alternatives and to implement them. And also we can learn how to recycle our technology that we already have for those rare earth minerals. But the real issue is that we just need to innovate and put the money not in to investments to dig up our deep sea, because the risks and the threats we cannot handle as a human species. The risk to expedite climate change is something that will be irreversible and catastrophic. And that investment is much better made in alternatives. And if we just have a 10-year moratorium, it will give us the time to make those innovations.
Well said, Vasser. And here's the other point, that we used to look at forests primarily as board feet of lumber, but a forest is a lot more than what you can extract from a dead tree. The deep sea, we now know, is rich, diverse, especially in microbes, but in many other forms of life as well. In an area that you can embrace with your arms, you may find a dozen different categories of life. The category that includes starfish, sea cucumbers, and the like. The category that includes mollusks, like clams and oysters and the like. Just go through this fabric of life. And the microbes are of particular interest, not just from the value of what we can extract from medicinals, or we might even learn how they extract the metals themselves. People speak of deep sea mining and the manganese nodules, these fist-sized or pebble-sized little bits they look like stones. They look like dead stones, but they're not. These are living systems, microbial systems that have taken literally hundreds of thousands, millions of years to form. So one of these rocks, these nodules the size of my fist, has taken as long to form as the history of humankind. And they're still alive. Like a coral reef, you look at those branched things, they look like they're dead, but they're not, they're alive, and they're still growing. The stony part is dead, but the living part that makes the corals grow, that's a continuing living system. The same is true with the crusts that are also targeted for taking, the mineralized crusts. It's a bacterial microbial process. It takes place over a very long period of time, but it takes a very short period of time to destroy it. People talk about, oh, it's a renewable resource. Renewable maybe in millions of years or hundreds of millions of years, but it will never go back to be what it was before we tear it up. And why? The whole point is why? For the benefit of a few we will take from all of us forever? Why? It just doesn't make sense. Can we just use this moment in time to look back through history and say that's been our habit, to take without thinking about the consequences. You cut the trees because it seems like a good idea at the time. And what we have done to the land. And if we could just go back armed with what we now know, what would we do differently? We have a chance now with the deep sea. It's the last best chance we will ever have to embrace an old growth system, like old growth forests. We cannot put those back either. But if we can be wise about how we conduct ourselves based on the evidence of cause and effect. If we do this, we might be able to take ourselves to a better place. And Vasser, I think you should have the last word if we have time to wrap things
Yeah,
up.
we are running out of time, and I do want to ask a quick question of Vasser. This moratorium, is there a petition? What's the mobilization around getting this moratorium, really tangible and people around the world engaged in it? What's the strategy?
So the strategy is one, we have to, the DSCC, the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, has been working on the deep sea, protecting the deep sea, and bringing a group together who cares about the conservation of the deep sea and not allowing deep sea bed mining to continue to go through without proper research, without baseline data, and without proper environmental regulations. So together we'll all be rolling out individual deep sea bed mining campaigns and a collective one together. So everyone should go follow them, and they will have updates and tell everyone what's going on and actions you can take. But further, the SOA, Sustainable Ocean Alliance, will be coming out with a petition as well on deep sea bed mining. There's a lot of actions around this, but since we are talking about a international body with 167 countries that are a part of it, you can imagine, even if you set precedents with a petition, which would be over 6 million signatures, that doesn't really quite, take the whole population into account. So it could be a little bit used against you, but I definitely think getting actions out there, especially for youth, to be able to say, this is what I did and this is how I can get engaged. But really the action right now that we're calling for is talk to your friends about this. Research it online. I have so many articles. I have so many studies done by Flora and Fauna International. They just came out with one in March, which is really amazing. It's 336 pages, so I don't think a lot of you will want to read the whole thing, but they do have an executive summary that is so important and will tell you the truth about deep sea bed mining, because a lot of the things out there that you might read and you come across will be funded by deep sea bed mining companies themselves. And of course, they're greenwashing this as much as they can. They're saying this is for a renewable energy future. But my question to them would be, if they're environmentalists, if they're scientists, and they're really for stopping climate change dead in its tracks, then why would they be undoing the very systems that are making sure that we don't have climate change today? Why are they undoing the very systems that are allowing us to have 10 years to try and draw down half of our carbon that we put out into the atmosphere? So those are the questions that they need to answer. And we'll have so many more actions that you can take. You can get on Twitter right now. You can tweet the head of the ISA, Michael Lodge, and say, we don't want deep sea mining. We don't need it. And it shouldn't happen, and call for a moratorium. If you have any connection to any media, if you are part of media, to make this part of a story, dig into the truth about deep sea mining, and you will see how urgent this issue is. So one last thing you can do is you can go onto the Oxygen Project. That's where I'm the campaign director for deep sea bed mining. And we will have a really great campaign rolling out around this with more actions and update you on the climate of deep sea bed mining. And if the mining code gets passed this July or not. So we really need to mobilize. So please just raise awareness, tell your friends, and start talking about deep sea bed mining.
Lift the lid on secrecy.
Yes.
Don't let them get away with it.
That's what the ISA really wants and is thriving off of right now, is the fact no one knows about deep sea mining. And just as a last little note, it's not deep sea mining, it's destructive deep sea mining. It's catastrophic deep sea mining. It's irreversible deep sea mining. And it's gonna destroy the systems that the oxygen we breathe. About every 2 out of 3, or till every 1 out of 2 breaths you take come from the ocean. And so we really need to start respecting and understanding these ecosystems, even though they're out of sight, out of mind. They affect us every day.